Good afternoon, it's 3:30pm. You're listening to OCR FM and this is Animal Nation. I'm Felicity Anderson. Thank you for joining me. If you tuned in last week, I really hope you enjoyed the show. And if you didn't, don't forget you can catch us on podcast on the OCR FM website at www.ocrfm.org.au. You can also keep up to date on the Animal Nation Facebook page. Today I will be talking to Kristin Leigh. Kristin is a passionate grassroots activist spearheading the campaign to end the Melbourne carriage horse trade. She was also an Animal Justice Party candidate for the seat of Casey in the 2016 federal election. I'll be talking to Kristin about recent developments in the carriage horse fight and where it's going from here. And also I'll be talking about her political aspirations and how she believes activism and politics can work together. Later in the show you will hear For Compassion's Sake, my weekly plea for a kinder world. This is Animal Nation and I'll be back with the indomitable Kristin Leigh after this message. Welcome to Animal Nation. I'm joined now by Kristin Leigh. Kristin has spent the last 6 years as a highly motivated activist, volunteering much of her time to various animal rights causes. She is passionate about being a leader for change, both in politics and advocacy, and believes the two are inseparable. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Kristin, this dedicated and fearless woman. Welcome to Animal Nation, Kristin.
Hi, Felicity. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure, and I appreciate you driving all the way down from Melbourne.
It's great to be here. It's very exciting.
Now, Kristin, my first question for you is what inspired you to become an animal rights activist?
Oh, gosh. I think just seeing the immense suffering and cruelty that happens on a day-to-day basis and being exposed to the reality of particularly animal agriculture, I guess it's something I've always had in the back of my mind from a child. I became a vegetarian quite young and then unfortunately went back to consuming animals in my 20s, and then I guess in my 30s I started opening up my mind to others outside of my own self and the human issues that I cared about, and started reconnecting again with animals. And I guess social media had quite a big impact as well. So once I saw the reality of what goes on a day-to-day basis, I didn't feel like becoming vegan was enough. I felt I needed to do more. Like many activists, I guess it's just to just not take part isn't enough. You need to actually force the change. So here I am. Yeah,
veganism is the reaction, I think, but we need to be proactive.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the Melbourne horse carriage campaign, how it started?
Sure. It was the summer of 2013-14. There was a horse being used to pull passengers around Melbourne on a 40-degree day, and there was a bit of an outrage on social media. And I saw it, and some other people I knew saw it, and we just said, "This is crazy. What's going on? Why is this horse being forced in the CBD on a 40-degree day?" The temperatures that emanate off the hard surfaces of the CBD can be 30 degrees hotter than the air temperature. So it seemed like there was a lot of support for a ban, and I think with these single issue campaigns, you want to really know that the people are on side for you to run them successfully, of course. And I felt like the people were really on side. So I thought we could ban this. We could get this done. So I'd researched with a couple of others, we researched the industry for about 3 months and opened my eyes up to it was worse than I actually thought it was. I've been a Melbourne resident for, most of my life, and I'd seen them for a long time. But, once you delve in, there's always more going on than you even see on the surface. So as much as I'd never really liked them, I wasn't aware of how bad it actually was. So once we'd done that research, we decided to go ahead, and the Animal Justice Party were keen for it to be an AJP campaign. So being a member of the party already, it made sense to do that. And obviously having that the local council were the ones that were endorsing the trade and allowing it to be as big as it was through their street trading permits. So we thought it was important that it was attached to a political party as well who, if we weren't successful in getting the street trading permits removed, the next local election that was coming up, we could have that, card in our back pocket to use as well. So, which we did at the last local election. So 3.5 years later, where the campaign is at where it's currently at. But that was the main motivation of just seeing how much goes on. The horses, are allowed still currently until 30th of June under a code of practice by the City of Melbourne to work in temperatures of up to 37 degrees. So that day of 40 degrees was a breach, but 37 is, outrageous in itself.
Yeah, there's not really a difference, is there?
No. And then also 12-hour days is completely fine.
12 hours?
Yeah, and that's in the code of practice. They can work a 12-hour day. I mean, why would they need to work anymore anyway? So it's essentially this code was written for the carriage drivers by the carriage drivers, and sadly the RSPCA, signed off on it. So they also, after work, they can be taken back to inner city yards, I suppose, concrete bits of dirt, fencing hanging off under a freeway, one's on a train line, on main roads with really not a lot of space to move about. So, some horses we believe get taken back to the country, others stay there. We've been told by an ex-carriage driver that worked in the industry a few years ago for months on end. So that was really heartbreaking to know they didn't even get an opportunity to graze for a long time.
Have some, like a bit of a holiday.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously different operators have different standards of how they care for the horses, but, at the end of the day, even if they are rotated, we still don't think a horse should be tied to a post for, any amount of time, unable to move freely with a carriage tied to them and a horse next to them that they can't get away from if they want to. They're just strapped in next to each other for 12 hours, and that's just unacceptable. Even if
fast-moving traffic.
Yeah, exactly. And then we realised how many accidents there'd been with spooking and the breaching of the road rules that was going on, and illegal U-turns in front of trams at the start of every ride, the use of the bike lanes, forcing cyclists into traffic. Drivers had been catapulted and had to be rushed to hospital with back injuries. Passengers have been taken to hospital.
Goodness, they keep that quiet, don't they?
Yeah.
I remember hearing of one incident where there was a collision with a tram, tram window, but... Yeah, it was just that you can rattle off that many different incidents.
Exactly.
It's not something you hear about.
That's right. And when you start running a campaign, that's the beauty. People start letting you know. So first you've got to dig in and find everything, but once you're running and you're getting your name out there as a campaign, people start saying, hey, I saw this happen and I caught this on camera and I did that. So people come together and help push that campaign forward so that, because obviously you can't be there, watching 24/7. No. So it's been a real kind of community movement, really. It's been really great that so many people have come together against it and helped to push this campaign forward. But yeah, that's the long answer to why we started the campaign.
I have to admit, it's a great shame of mine. My husband proposed to me on a carriage horse carriage in Melbourne. Yep. And I was vegetarian then, and I had, always believed I loved animals and respected them. And at that time in my life, I just thought, it's just this nice romantic thing. And now I just think, goodness, was I mad?
But that's right. I mean, a friend of mine, her partner proposed too, and at the time, many years ago, I thought, oh, how lovely, how nice. I didn't think about it, and that's, I guess, why the campaign, we tried to be very educational and respectful, and tried to find that fine line between, yes, we're the voice for the horses, and we're pushing for them, and we won't compromise. We're not here to shorten the hours, or to make sure they get to graze at the end of the day. We're here to stop their exploitation, but at the same time we understand that people are evolving, people are learning, and not everyone's always going to agree. As much as we've had a lot of support, we can understand that people don't understand what we see, and we're just trying to help them to see that, particularly with, I think, the vision of them being tied up there all day, unable to move, which is the bit that really gets me more than anything else, more than the hot temperatures can be dangerous and uncomfortable, and the hard surfaces can lead to all sorts of ailments, but just the real loss of freedom and the loss of expression. We've really tried to push that, because people will say, well, they get well fed and they get water. It's not about that. I mean, it's about their life.
Yeah, they're being deprived of their natural movement and.
Yeah.
it's not right.
And their freedom of thought and freedom of expression.
So with the end of the permits being given, what's your next step now?
So, as of July 1st, there's no more street trading, which is a huge win for us. That was our focus of the campaign, was to end the street trading permits.
And so just quickly, that means that they can't trade from the city centre, doesn't it?
Yeah, or anywhere. Yeah. So they can't tout for fares, essentially. So if you call up and make a pre-booking, they can pick you up.
Right.
If you make one online, they can pick you up, but they can't. The majority of their business is from standing there all day, because the trade itself, it doesn't, from what we've seen, it doesn't bring people to Melbourne. It's more of it can for special occasions like, a wedding proposal and things, but the majority is walk by traffic. Oh, we're a tourist around town.
It's a spontaneous activity.
Yeah, exactly.
People,
So street trading is a huge part of their trade. So the idea was remove those permits, and therefore the trade, will fizzle out on its own. If it doesn't, then we will start pressuring Vic Roads and Luke Donnellan, the Road Safety Minister, to actually get them removed off the roads entirely. We're hoping we don't have to go to that stage. We're kind of just waiting to see what happens after July 1st, but we're not going to just step back and allow them to continue. And there's always the potential they'll illegally street trade as well. So we need to be on them and watching them and documenting that. And if we need to interfere, we're going to interfere. We're happy to do direct action because we are so close, and this is really the crucial time, really, to push this right through to get them out of these inappropriate environments, which, as you mentioned, like even the horse being smashed in the head by a tram. That's just unacceptable that a horse is put in that situation in the first place. And that horse never, no one followed up. The police just let the driver take off. So no one's regulating.
There's no incident reports. There's no follow-up on the condition, welfare of the horses afterwards.
Nothing.
So do you have any plans in place for at least like offering rehoming of horses? Or
well, that's been difficult because we don't know what the operators want to do, so we can't sort of put anything in place until we know. So all we can do at this stage, we've spoken to people who have offered sanctuary to horses. We've spoken to people who have offered to help rehome, who run rescue organisations, and we've spoken to supporters of the campaign who want to throw money at it for the horses to be rehomed. But we can't really put all that in practice until we know there are actually some horses that we do need to rehome.
With the support of the traders.
Yeah, exactly. And we've, opened our arms to them and said, if you need help rehoming, we're here, and we haven't heard. So if we do hear from them, we've said that they can remain anonymous, not from us, obviously, we need to communicate, but from the public, because our priority is those horses. So if there is a concern that they can't afford to take care of them now, then we'll do everything in our power to make sure those horses get to live out their lives.
It's unfortunate to see, because obviously it's quite hostile at times, the communication. It's just since the ban was announced, it was really unfortunate to see how many threats of horses being sent to the knackery there were. And there's that contradiction from, they say how much they love their horses and they're looking after them and their welfare is paramount, and yet, they'll threaten to send them to the knackery.
Exactly.
That doesn't sound like love to me.
No, that's right. And that's what we reinforce. It's just, there is an offering here, then that's not an option. And yes, if you love the animals you care for, you, like any family member, you will do everything in your power to ensure that they get to live their lives out. So it's fear-mongering, and it's every animal exploitation industry uses it. If we're not harming them, they won't exist. It's just, the logic just is quite mind-boggling, really.
Now, you ran for the seat of Casey in last year's federal election for the Animal Justice Party, and I wanted to talk to you about how you see politics and activism working together. I think, like for me, I've always found that both are essential, but they're quite polarised, I guess, because politics is so much about compromise, and activism is often about a pure ideology. So how do you feel that they work together, and why is that important?
I guess I've just opened up to that over the years, and I've only been active for 6 years, so I'm still learning and growing, as we all should be. Should never get set in one train of thought, but from my experience so far, when I look at the number of non-human animals that exist in this country, and that's in the billions, when you include everyone, wildlife and domesticated and, animal agriculture, of course, like there's 29 million cows alone, and there's 24 million, I think, humans roughly. So there's more cows than humans in this country. And then you've got this political system that is made up of humans who, not one, until the AJP arrives, not one's focus is for the non-human animals. And there's so many more of them, and they live with us and they live alongside us. And now it blows my mind that, once you're in this work, that it's crazy that no one's there considering them. And apparently approximately 80% plus of decisions that are made in Parliament impact the lives of non-human animals. So to not have someone there considering them, is really a disservice to them. And I feel like for an example, duck shooting, I went and spoke to James Merlino, the Labor Party member, and about duck shooting a few years ago, and I had all these facts and figures and photographs of the horrendous cruelty that goes on. And the fact that 75%, this was in 2007, it was set, a Morgan poll showed 75% of people are against duck shooting as a recreational sport. And I hate to say sport, sorry.
That's all right.
And I'm sure that's grown a lot since then, because there's been so much more awareness about animals. And he still said, yes, the people don't want it, but it will continue because of factions in the party. And it's like, well, okay, if we're not there, working with these systems, you think that the people are enough to make change. And unfortunately, the reality is they're not, because the politicians don't always listen to the people. If they did, duck shooting would have been banned many years ago. So we need to be using all the cards that we have. Yeah. And if one big part of that is politics, it's not very, sexy. It's not very appealing to a lot of activists, because it's a bit dull in so many ways, and there's a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of going in circles and stuff. But we can change that, hopefully, maybe, or at least be there to give them a voice and represent them. And I think it's a part of it. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely a part of it that, for people who don't want to be on the front line in grassroots campaigning and things, it's an avenue for them to be a voice for animals. So I'm still finding my way in that whole world, really. But I do see there's a lot of power, a lot to be achieved for animals there, definitely.
Yeah. I think I do think it's an essential tool in our overall kit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this ban from the street trading, that was a decision made by politicians in local council. Yeah. I mean, waiting for a change of heart by the operators who profit from the use of animals is not going to happen just yet. Exactly. No. So,
well, I think we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you one last question. If you could say one thing to the non-vegans listening, what would it be?
Oh dear, that's a great question. I would say, put yourself in the shoes of others, or the feet of others. Yeah. And imagine try to understand that we're just different species. Just try to really open your heart to that. We're raised to not see that. We're raised to separate. We're raised to see. I mean, I say non-human animals, so there's us and them. But there's so many of them, and they're so varied and so vast. But at the end of the day, all we all really want is comfort, love, the essentials of life, and all the stuff that humans cloud themselves with is difficult, and we bombard ourselves with so much. But at the end of the day, really all we want is those simple things, and that's all they want. And there is that we're more similar than we are different, I feel. And if people could recognise that, I think they would start making better choices, and I hope they do. And I think that's happening. It's too slow. It needs to speed up. So get with it. Everyone, open your heart.
That's a great note to finish on. Thank you so much, Kristin. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure the listeners would agree, so keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Well, I think it's time for some music, and you might want to crank this one up. It's Justice with Love SOS. Yesterday, the 12th of June, the guns fell silent across the wetlands of Victoria as the bloody 2017 duck shooting season came to an end. These beautiful wild places have returned to their usual tranquility, and those who call them home can once again go about their lives in relative peace. My teenage years were spent just near Lake Connewarre in Geelong. This uniquely beautiful place holds many precious memories for me. The tall swaying reeds which gave cover to black swans, dusky moorhens, pelicans, cormorants, and of course a myriad of duck species created a magical labyrinth for one to explore. Each year when the shooting started and panicked ducks took refuge on our dams, my anger rose. I thought to myself, how could anyone want to bring such violence to this serene place? My anger soared when I saw the litter left behind, the ground dug up from spinning tyres, and of course the discarded bodies of both game species and those who were protected. It was clear to me as a young girl that this activity had little to do with feeding families and much to do with feeding the lust for blood. But I imagined that very soon the day would come when this barbarism was relegated to history. Tragically, that was not to be. Studies show that most people don't support duck shooting. Society largely finds it distasteful, to say the least. But it continues, passed from one generation to the next. Children are taught by their parents that it is acceptable and normal to kill others for entertainment. During this year's season, scores of endangered freckled ducks were killed, their bodies abandoned. Hundreds of game species were shot and buried, having no flesh taken from their lifeless bodies. They lost their lives for nothing more than the thrill of the kill. Large numbers of shooters showed flagrant disregard for both life and law, and yet still the season continued. It no longer makes me angry. Well, not like it did when I was a young girl. It now makes me sad, deeply sad. I think of the families that have been decimated, the individuals shot but not killed, left to die slow, painful deaths. I think of the ducklings orphaned, and my heart aches. I also think of the young people who for the past 3 months have had their minds corrupted, their empathy crushed, and my heart also aches for them. Taking another's life is not a skill our children should be learning, and I would go so far as to call it child abuse. My sadness is born of the realisation that we still have so far to go before we call ourselves civilised. My hope is that the Victorian Government will bring an end to the wrongdoing before next year's season. I applaud the activists who are exposing this activity for what it is, an atrocity. These dedicated people are leading us to a better future, and that future can't come soon enough. Is it a pipe dream to imagine a world where all violence perpetrated by humans is considered socially unacceptable? I don't think so. For compassion's sake, I hope not. Well, that's Animal Nation wrapped up for another week. Thanks again to Kristin Leigh for joining me for a chat today. Other species have got a real champion in their corner with her. I hope you can join me next week for a conversation with Pete Crosby, founder and owner of Willow White Animal Sanctuary and vegan advocate. Pete and I had a great chat the other week about the challenges and gifts of running a sanctuary and the pressing need for change in the way we relate to other beings. His commitments don't allow him to speak to me live on Tuesday, so that's a pre-recorded interview. I can tell you now you won't want to miss it. Until then, be kind and remember the words of Henry Beston. They are not underlings, they are other nations.